because last episode we made that crack about Sea of Thieves.
Right, and then you typed it in wrong because you.
And then I typed it in wrong, and then you read it wrong.
That's all right.
So I'm gonna start slipping things in there and see, like, if you're gonna Ron.
Is this gonna be like Anchorman, where I say
exactly? He reads everything you give him. See if that works.
Yes,
that'll be good.
Welcome to Disparate Worlds, where an irresistible force meets an immovable object. I'm Mox, and this is Sechari, and we are comparing and contrasting Ashes of Creation and Pantheon Rise of the Fallen.
I'm pretty sure we got those in the opposite order.
Maybe. Doesn't matter. It's okay.
Who knows?
Ashes is in front for an episode or two. I'm okay with that, you know.
Get ahead. Keep going, Steven and friends. It just feels weird when like, because last episode we made that crack about Sea of Thieves.
Right, and then you typed it in wrong because you.
And then I typed it in wrong, and then you read it wrong.
That's all right.
So I'm gonna start slipping things in there and see, like, if you're gonna Ron.
Is this gonna be like Anchorman, where I say
exactly? He reads everything you give him. See if that works.
Yes,
that'll be good. Jokes aside, hello to you, friends. Good to have you with us as always. Welcome to another episode of Disparate Worlds, assuming I can say that right, where we have to rely, if you haven't figured that out yet, on guest hosts to hard carry us to something resembling competent content.
Right, but the problem is, like, we went right to the top, like, so, like, I don't know, like, what are we gonna do, like, next month, next week?
We got nothing. We're you know what,
let's
like,
split this into like 17 parts, and then we're good for like the next 3 months. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Milk it for all the content. We could do like unpacking videos and briefs on our own content. How about that?
That's a good idea. That's so meta.
It's so meta. Yeah, it's just, you use your own content to generate new content. That's great. Okay, enough beating around the bush. Mox, let's get serious.
Did you say we're beating around the bush?
Yeah, it's a saying.
Beaning around the bush?
Beating around the bush.
Oh, beats. Oh, I thought we were talking about beans.
Beaning around the bush would have been a good one for this, though. That said, actually, maybe we should change some stuff here. So, this episode, friends, we were joined by Chris Perkins, who many of you know as Joppa, which I'm so glad we managed to score some time with him. He's very great.
Yes.
Creative director, producer, and design lead at Visionary Realms, who of course is working on Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. We're able to sit around for a little while and discuss the complexities of community, social systems, and all of those things going on in MMORPGs, and of course how they play out in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen.
Yep. We cover everything from kind of conceptual things down to the gameplay side of things, like how do we group, not how do we group, but kind of how do you refill a group when you're missing somebody, and things of that nature that are more technical on the game side, but also like Chris got to talk a little bit about the concepts and the thought process behind the social side, which is really cool. Chris likes to talk, so it made it easy.
It does, yeah. It was very conversational, and that was. And of course, we had stupid questions to ask the whole time, and so he humored us very, very nicely. So, before we present to you the first half of that conversation, guys, that's how we're going to structure this. It was a long interview, so we're actually going to release this in 2 episodes. This is the first of them, right? The second episode, hot on its heels. It's coming out, I'd say 2 or 3 days after we premiere this one. That one will premiere also, right? But 2 excuses, we're going to call them disclaimers instead.
Right.
Number 1, we had a conversation, friends. You always get heat when you're, having a conversation with these folks, because everyone wants the new information. Give us the new information. We just had a conversation, and there were some questions we had that may have been old, well understood news, right? Nothing new. Whatever was interesting to us, or questions we had that we maybe didn't know the answer on, we did take a quick look, right, at the wikis just to see if we didn't.
Yeah, I tried to do some research both on the library Pantheon and the wiki and such to see if things like, if we were repeating stuff. But ultimately what I decided after chatting with a couple other content creators was that it's okay to repeat stuff. As long as you're not repeating something that was like asking a question that he just answered yesterday. You know, that would be silly. But it's okay to repeat stuff, and it's okay to have stuff be reinforced because the answer may have changed.
Absolutely.
And not everybody digs into every piece of wiki information such it's out there, so it's okay to do that. So we just decided, rather than going through each question saying has this been asked before, we asked ourselves, does this fit into our under the umbrella of our topic? That was more important to us in the long run.
Yeah, and it flowed well. We had a great conversation. It was a great time, and so we want to invite you into that conversation. That's what we're doing here, right? So but that said, there were a couple of beans in there, right? So by all means, watch for those beans, and if there's something new, there's something new.
Yeah, strap on your big boy panties because you're gonna need them.
there was one or two things that were mentioned that I think will be impactful.
At least discussed frequently, if not controversial.
Yes, that we will be showing up on the forums. Let's just say that. Okay, the second disclaimer we have is that because of the nature of how we recorded this, we tried to make things go as easy on Chris as we could. So we changed the way we ordinarily record. Typically things are pretty tightly controlled, etc. This was more easygoing. So we had phones going off and Windows alerts going off all throughout. So forgive the unprofessional nature of our recording. It's all really Mox's fault. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so
let's roll.
We have wasted 5 minutes and 51 seconds getting into this. Are you ready to fire off the first part?
Are you ready? Are they ready? That's the big question.
I'm not ready because we already did it. So let's we show it to them and see what happens.
Well, welcome back, Chris Perkins, aka Joppa, Visionary Realms creative director, and he is leading the team developing Pantheon: Rise of Fallen. Welcome back to Disparate Worlds, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Anytime you want to come, you are welcome to hop in here.
Yeah, we didn't fully chase him off the last time. I suppose that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We might have tried. Great. Yeah, so I remember last time the first question out of our mouths was, "Hey, can you tell us about yourself?" or something.
How'd you come to be part of Pantheon?
Yeah,
and he's like, Chris was like, I've answered this like 800 billion times, and you two idiots are asking me again. He didn't say that. He was much more gracious. But...
Yes.
Hopefully you didn't interpret it.
No, we're all good.
I understand the need for the question.
We're trying to be nicer, though. I think that's what we're trying to say. Instead of asking such stupid questions, we're going to try to ask.
We actually tried to research and see if there was stuff out there on these questions, but no guarantees that there isn't going to be repeated information. But repeated information can be good for people who've never heard the question before, or who aren't digging into the wikis and or the library Pantheon, on this topic. Let's say. Speaking of topics. Today we're going to be discussing the social side of MMOs and what Pantheon is attempting to achieve in that. We're just starting this conversation out, but we anticipate this being a multi-part interview, so we'll probably be splitting it into 2 episodes, maybe 3. We'll see how it goes. Tell us what we're going to talk about, Sechari.
Okay, so I gave Mox the lead so that he wouldn't bury it, because that's what I do. I make this sort of long and drawn out, so that I gave myself a long and drawn out piece. So Joppa, we'd love to chat with you this afternoon about just the complexities associated with social relationships, right? I know that it's not enough to build a world and to throw everybody in it and expect everything to go well. It's so much more complex than that, right? There are things people are used to seeing already in MMOs that are, like your chat window, group finder type of tools, guild window, those kinds of things, right? Standard expectations that people bring kind of with them as they step in, just from having played other games. But there's so much more than that, right? I think the community size is an aspect of the way we relate to each other. You've got, I think in terms of tenure is one of the things, right? You've got veterans that interact with veterans and new players interacting with veterans, and how does that go off? You've got not every relationship is a good one, right? So you sometimes have contentious relationships and folks that are fighting in chat windows, and how do you handle that, right? So it's not just the tooling that's associated. How do you help people guild up, right? How do you help people group up and backfill groups and things? Although that's all a part of this, but there's also the studio vision and what you're trying to achieve in terms of that, and then like studio policies, right, and etiquette and expectations for conduct. That's a part of this, right, and then enforcement if people don't, so many topics or related things in the world of social relationships in MMOs, and so all that to say, this is a very big, complex topic, and we know and we appreciate you humoring us in getting started on it. So.
And that's going to wrap up part 1 of the interview.
Right,
it took so long. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Chris.
Appreciate it, guys. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right. So, Chris, can you describe for us the guiding principles, and in general, the vision that you're trying to achieve when it comes to us as humans having relationships in this fantasy world that you're building?
Or as a scar, maybe, right? Or as a...
right. That's right.
Dark mirror.
Humans could be, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the on that note, I mean, the role-playing opportunities are going to be, I would say, nicely diverse in terms of what you would want to role-play and what vantage point you'd want to role-play that from. And do definitely expect to see a pretty robust role-play community with Pantheon. There's so much opportunity for it. There's so much depth and opportunities even within the game mechanics to maybe take your character off the beaten path, so to speak, and go against the norms of what you would expect with a certain race class combination, given the background and the context of the lore and whatnot. But yeah, on a high level, one of the things that we have hammered for years has been the importance of shared experience within these games. And in order to create a genuine shared experience, there has to be some degree of limiting how many walls you allow players of the game to put around themselves to insulate themselves from others. What I mean by that is something that I've harped on quite a bit, I would say recently, has been the trend in games in MMORPGs to take on this kind of something very similar to a mobile game, kind of a framework where it is a system of different game modes that have been kind of woven together into like a hub. And so when I log into something like a World of Warcraft, for example, I might log out and log in a city, in a Stormwind, or my goodness, it's been so long since I've played Orgrimmar or Dalaran, or something like that. But I'm going to queue up for my PvP activities. I'm going to queue up for my dungeons. I'm going to do everything from that place. And so the opportunity for shared experience by playing the game out in the world, exploration, moving through kind of a shared environment where different things can happen, different crises can happen, different events can take place, and especially a game that's built with not being group only. Certainly, we've talked at length about the embracing of the solo player to the extent that it should be possible to log into Pantheon in off hours, or log in after having a really rough day and you want to just be super antisocial, but you want to get into the world and play the game. Then there needs to be avenues there to do that, and do that enjoyably, and do that meaningfully. But obviously, we are a group-centric game, in that we've designed the game to be very rewarding and to allow you to achieve the greatest, opportunity for riches, reward, but then really, kind of lean into a lot of the strategic elements of your class and the class play with the synergistic abilities, and the way that the perils that you just end up facing when you're going to areas that require these groups to form together. That having a game predicated on that, and that woven into the framework of it, is a game where we're expecting to see this kind of shared world, shared experience, players, grazing and glancing off of each other in real experiences, add a social level and dynamic to the game that, I guess, to speak in somewhat of an aggrandized way, I think if those things don't start being embraced,
Right.
they're going to go away. You know, they're just, we're going to get too far removed. And so it is an intentional decision to lean into that. Not so much that we create a game that's largely inaccessible to a, you know, modern day audience. We're not looking to engineer intentional obtuseness and intentional just dated and fatiguing things that just make it needlessly difficult to get together with other people and do the fun things that you're there to do. But I think there's a nice thread to walk there in between the two extremes.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, you're talking about a market, right? I know that, you know, already we're departing from my notes, and that's beautiful. But kind of like a market where people have expectations that they come to. And there's been an evolution of MMOs, right? Where we've made this journey where new things have been tried out and games borrow from each other. And so here we are with the evolution of things as they've been. You're one of the things you're talking about is like going back to open world as a principle, as opposed to instanced play, right? The PvP that you go into, you step into an instance, or you step into an instance dungeon where everything's very much boxed like that. You know, you keep others out so that you guys can have a quality experience, which is intentionally not messy in many MMOs these days. You know, they don't want people impeding on your experience. If you got a solid group there, then, and it's easy to backfill that, right? Somebody else just steps into the instance, as opposed to open world where it's, you know, it's a much messier. Groups, you know, tend to run into each other and things. So,
but it's even more than that, though, because he's talking about, like, you're standing in Stormwind and you queue up for PvP and you get teleported to that. You complete your PvP and then you go back to Stormwind. There's zero travel.
As if it had never happened. Yeah, totally.
Right.
There's zero world impact as well, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. I'd like to ask a follow-up. At the very beginning of your discussion there, you mentioned about tremendous amount availability for RP and such. Do you see RP being just happening organically within a normal server, or do you think will you have RP dedicated servers with certain rule sets, like name restrictions and behavior restrictions and things like that?
There will definitely be RP dedicated servers.
Okay.
That's more what I have in mind.
Okay.
Not that there wouldn't be impromptu RP and things like that. Potentially anywhere, but
everywhere, right? Yeah.
Right. And the RP servers, will they have their own rule set?
Potentially. There would be some resources put into making those more than just, hey, this is the server with an RP tag on the end of the name. There would be some resources put into making that feel more distinctly like an RP server, and typically rule sets and things will follow along with that to support that feel.
Okay, so what about tooling then, like an out of character chat? I know, like usually RP that I've seen, people just are in character all the time unless they're out of character, in which case they tag what they're saying with something like that. Do you foresee any kind of tooling to facilitate that?
Tooling's kind of a big word. I don't.
It is.
Well, it's a small
Right,
word,
yeah.
but it can have big meaning. So I wouldn't want to wade too far into that word. But what I would say is there are some good ways to facilitate being able to make that distinction in how you communicate through dedicated chat channels and potentially other UI elements that you can use to tag things. To just make it less cumbersome than having to type out your intention every time.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. So, is there anything that's going to be unique to Pantheon from a social point of view?
This is a really hard question, kind of by intent, just to warn you, right?
Yeah.
I know the whole concept of let's go back to the classics and then do the like a classic styled MMO in a new way is in its own way very challenging, right? Like so there's a sense in which people may go back and go, oh, I've experienced this before in a different way, right? And that there's some nostalgia associated with it. But so maybe it's not necessarily new things, but old things in a new way, right? But we thought we'd ask you, like, is there anything that you're going to be doing that you could say is pretty distinctively different from the market in terms of social stuff?
Well, I think old things in a new way is an important thing to say because, and that would be part of the answer, because there's nothing that we're planning on literally just dragging and dropping, from 2 decades plus ago, just into Pantheon, boom, there it is. And so there are things that are going to feel reminiscent, but there's work to be done to modernize it, because even the most veteran gamers, the people that were, no-lifing Meridian 59 and UO and Asheron's Call and these games, they're still living in the modern generation. They're still playing and have been playing games for many, many years that have just slowly and in some cases stealthily kind of brought along these quality of life changes. So in that regard, some of what's going to make Pantheon unique is we're not jumping onto every modern bandwagon that MMORPGs have embraced, but we're looking to evolve some of these classical experiences and make them more palatable to the modern gamer, where a game can essentially be able to introduce that era of gaming to, when I think like my oldest son, 12-year-old, and the kind of the current like teenage years and young 20-somethings and whatnot. Like there are so many people who would resonate with a game experience like that, but getting past that barrier. And again, not that we're trying to this is not there are some people whose flags will be going up saying, they're trying to appeal to everybody, and it's absolutely not the case. But there's a difference between removing some barriers of entry so that people who may not have given the game a chance and who end up loving it will actually do so, versus bending over backwards to cater to every modern compromise and sacrifice that's been made to maximize, like, that's not what we're trying to do.
No, that makes sense to me, right? Because I mean, if I think about it, like mullets came back. You mentioned a 12-year-old, right? Like mullets came back. I never thought they would.
My wife and I were just talking about that like 2 days ago.
Mullets, right? And then Uggs are back in style, right? I thought Uggs were out. Back they come, right? And then bell bottoms, right? Like I'm seeing all of these. And even like I think right now my kids are starting to dress that 90s kind of a grunge, the big pants and stuff. They're all playing with that. To them, brand new. But to those that have been around for a while, it's like, oh my goodness, here we go again. This is another round of the same old stuff. But I think there's a sense in which maybe the same thing is happening in the MMO world, where a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 22-year-old who's playing now may step into these MMOs, and this is the coolest, newest. I can't believe this is so different from compared to everything else that I'm playing right now, and it's a brand new thing that happens to be 20 years old. So it's wild to me. So
that's what we're hoping to see. I mean, time will tell, but
yeah, absolutely. So you wrote that into your tenants, right? Mox loves the tenants. He wrote an article series on the tenants, just thinking them through on his own, right? So one of them was ensure players have time to inform important social bonds. Right, have the time. So, how do you foresee that taking shape? Is it where you're trying to get players together and then just kind of give them quantity time, and that result in quality experiences? What does that mean to you?
This is a really good question, and I want to try to answer it from two different sides. The first side would be ensuring that players have time to do that, can lean back into the classical spirit of these games by answering it in a way of how we've designed Downtime and how we've designed resource regeneration and the notion that you would need to rest and recuperate to be able to keep pressing on, and how that creates a sense of opportunity. It creates time for social bonds, communication, having a conversation to happen, because you're not literally locked into a rotation constantly, or you're not just like hammering onto the next pull, or the current way in some games where the tank runs around gathering up everything that they can, and then it's just an
AoE it down. Yeah.
Our brains.
To socialize there, unless you're on voice chat, but I think the people getting on voice chat with people they don't know, and it's just, it happens, but
I've seen video of you guys, like doing a playthrough on something and everyone's sitting around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's sitting around a campfire in a cave or something, just like not playing right now, but this is a showcase of the gameplay, right? Like, but it's I think it's what you're talking about, the just the downtime, the between pulls is as everybody is important at socializing aspect of things as the
and it's funny because people will comment when they see that, like, this looks dull, this
like slow pace or something, yeah,
boring and slow, but it's one of the difficult things to communicate in a game like this when you're watching it versus playing it, because when you're in the moment, the fact that you are typically in those situations surrounded by imminent danger, surrounded by the ever-present opportunity for chaos to erupt, you realize how precious your resources are, and so every little bit of it that you get back is important. It matters. It just is a very different feel when you're in the moment. So we have to, over time, Pantheon will continue to improve in terms of it, what it's presenting to an audience as far as the visuals and kind of the fluidity and the connectivity of the different actions players are doing and the way they look and sound and feel and all that. But at the end of the day, it is a difficult thing to translate unless you're experiencing it. But the other side of it is, so there's that side of it, which is more of something like a downtime and that emphasis on recuperation and the need for that and the time that it creates. But then the other way you can answer that question, which is also true, is it's one of the reasons why we're trying to design around that core 2 to 3 hour gameplay window, because you can also answer how are you making time, how are you ensuring players have time. Part of it is by respecting the time of the player and saying, we're not going to make you sign up for a 12-hour raid experience where you're falling asleep at the keyboard and may end all of it with nothing to show. That's not respecting.
Thank you for being nice to the working dad. I'll just say that. Yeah. Right. Because that's my gameplay experience. I get on at night and it's already 9:30 by the time I've gotten kids largely wrapped up. Dinner's over, right? And I've got 2 hours, and I'm trying to do something meaningful to where I get done with my night and I've enjoyed my experience, and I've done something meaningful. I've accomplished something. Right, and standing around waiting for a pull is too much. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. So those bite-sized chunks, like kind of designing around 2 hours, I think is super important.
I remember the days of EverQuest where you'd log in the night before, get positioned for the raid, and you couldn't play that character till the next night, till the raid happened the next night, because it was sitting there in the plane of hate or something. Like it was a serious commitment. So it's nice to hear that we will be able to do meaningful things in short bursts. Not saying I won't have a 12-hour or 18-hour session. Like, not
sure.
Gonna,
yeah, I mean, that is your problem.
Like that's not going to happen.
Knowing you, especially, yeah, with multiple different characters too. Oh,
yeah.
Well, so I mean, we've got questions in this, and I'll just jump there because we're on the topic of it, right? But one of the things that occurred to Mox and I while we were playing this whole thing out is, what about backfilling groups, right? Because groups is a part of this. And hey, we get on. You find, or maybe if you plan for a 2-hour dungeon raid or something, get your group together, friends from real life, or you maybe pug a person or two, get it together, and you go in, right? And let's say you lose your tank, and now you're in a bit of a sticky situation, right? Because the group can't really progress with that. And now, so on one side, you got a group that's stuck, and you're having to backfill that thing, and the group is having to contend with how do we meet up with our new tank that we found. By the way, one question is, how do we facilitate doing that, right? That's a side question. But then once you get together, like, do we have to fight our way to the beginning of the dungeon to get back together with it and then go back in through that open world stuff? And then, in light of, and I know this is a complex question, I apologize, right? But in light of respecting the 2-hour time experience and trying to allow people to get something done meaningfully, how does that look, right? Is the value that we get out of that more people hanging out with each other? Or is it accomplishing something in game, or some balance between the two?
Yeah, backfilling is an interesting, multifaceted conversation, and ultimately there's so much to account for it in the design of things. So as far as giving you a succinct answer, I will try.
It wasn't a succinct question. So
no, it was not.
No.
That's fair.
I'd bear the lead, like, so.
Well, I'm just going to go in the order that they're kind of popping into my head. Some of these things are more or less effective or more or less solution oriented. But the first thing I'll call out is the decision to include a near-death system. This is not a true backfilling situation, but this is more pointing towards things like having a death penalty, having a corpse run of some kind, and really a protection from a full wipe situation. Because typically you're going to have a way to resurrect a player and bring a player back as long as some vestige of the group has stayed alive. But in order to try to prevent situations where groups would make it down to a certain place, they get in a bad situation, maybe a disposition or a trait they weren't expecting, or there's a fracture that's shown up or something that kind of throws a wrench in things, they don't adapt quite quickly enough. If a player dies, instead of just they're dead and we can't battle res them, or we're in a situation where we can't get them back, they're not going to die immediately. And so that near-death system is there to provide that bit of buffer to protect a group from having
so the group doesn't necessarily fall apart. Right, because it would be so much more stress on that group if you have to now start the place. You resurrect outside, right, and now have to run your way back in. That would be stress on the group. That would make, I would say, when the group experiences enough stress, and I've seen this happen with groups, right? If there's just enough stress, if there's just that one key player in the group that's just not doing a good enough job or whatever, the group falls apart. One person leaves. I'm not doing this, and then now you're down a mage, right? Or you're down a healer or something. So. How do you backfill that, and then somebody else before the whole thing's out, right? So I think the ability for a group to not fall apart is very important, but also the ability to recover quickly is part of that as well, right? Keep that group going.
That's right.
That will also come into the and this is not present in most MMOs. Is reputation will be important in Pantheon. Like if you get the reputation of a healer that bails on a group at the first wipe, you're not going to get invited to groups, and you'll struggle, and that's a good thing. That's as opposed to what happens now is that there's just like this anonymity. There's so many healers out there, nobody cares. So that will make a difference.
Few questions about server size though, because I think with the larger servers that becomes less of a thing, right? If it's a smaller group, then you can make a reputation. So.
Do you guys have a target for that, Joppa? Server size, like how many you'd like to see on each players you'd like to see on a server?
We know that we're targeting somewhere between 3 and 5K.
Okay.
In terms of what we know that we can comfortably support from a network and server stability and performance side. We will make that decision. We will finalize that number once we start being able to look at more of a holistic picture of content disbursement, player migration, and just how healthy the world is.
Right.
So it'll be like a beta decision then, right?
It'll be a decision that'll come later.
Because the more I think about that, the more I just see that proliferating into complexity as well, right? Like let's say you're 3,000 people. That's what the server supports. Let's say is what 3,000 to 5,000 people. On day one, you have 3,000 to 5,000 people, probably a full server, right? Everybody's doing the same set of early quests, and how do you get through that competition?
Well, they're probably going to be in 8 to 10 different starting locations, though.
True, but still,
each
right?
Has its own starting area.
So divide 5,000 people by 8, right? There's still a lot of people,
What we don't want to do is what, for some reason, many companies do, which is spin up hundreds of other servers to create a place for players to go, because what inevitably happens is then a couple weeks in, those servers are ghost towns, and now you've got all these different servers and all these players kind of spread all over like crazy. What I would rather see us do is temporarily kind of incorporate even though I personally hate this in games that embrace it as a standard function, but we might have several instances of Thrown Fast. We might have several instances of, these starting zones to support that overflow, and for the first week or two until populations spread out enough, stabilize, and then we can do away with that. But I would rather us do that than spool up all these additional servers. And then deal with all that on the back end.
Because our last episode, we were talking about that very thing, right? There's this huge, you launch an MMO, everyone wants to dip a toe in the water, right? So everybody's playing the thing. And then within 2 weeks, within 2 months, there's this huge dip, as people...
There's always a drop-off.
Always, right? And it's expected, and it doesn't mean that the game is dying. It just means that's people try it. Some realize it's not for me. Some get upset with certain things. This game isn't ready enough. It should have been held off, so I'm going to wait for a while. There's a plethora of reasons, right? But no matter what, there's that die-off. And what happens is that all of those servers that they created on day one now are all ghost towns. And then you've got this, so you've had this like splitting, and people can't group on to play with their friends on the same server. And then they finally get that figured out, and now they're getting merged into server, and then they find they are guests in someone else's server ultimately.
Exactly,
which is the weirdest.
Not a good feeling.
Yeah.
The new servers are ghost town. The original servers are leached. They've been leached from the population that they could have. I mean, it's just a much healthier situation to use instancing in that situation to create overflow zones to keep the server together.
That's an interesting architectural side, right? The networking and architecture, I imagine, is a much more complex.
Yeah, we're
side
ready.
Of stuff. So you're saying that was part of what you were doing with the upgrades. Nice.
It's good to hear you have a launch ready plan for server size, health, and all that stuff, because we lived through it, and New World did a good job of coming back, but that initial launch was
rocky. Yeah.
It was.
I mean, just trying to get everybody on the same server, right? Granted, we had a huge community we were trying to start with, and that made things make your own hard mode.
But it took like 12 hours to get in the game to begin with, and then not fun.
Oh, here's a question.
In the charm of a new game and a new server, to me, like I hate waiting too, but I don't know. It's always exciting to me when I don't want a 12-hour queue. Don't get me wrong. It is. It's such a fun time. I'm excited.
Yeah. We did have
Can we go back to the social question with the backfill? Because I do want to speak to the backfill specifically a little bit. So we talked about near death. That's more of a preventative measure. But it doesn't account for things like if a wipe still happens. It doesn't account for, hey guys, sorry, I unexpectedly got to go. And so what do you do in situations like that? And there's a couple of quick things I want to say. Number one, we've shown this a few times before, but in our dungeons especially, we're building in safe zones, essentially places along the way that are they're out of the way enough, out of the path enough, and will be in some regard protected. I mean, we have to still work out a few of the specifics of these areas, because we don't want it to be a place that's easily used to just drop aggro on things, train people, that whole 9 yards.
But a way station, right? A place to set up a campfire, probably.
Yeah, a place to get out of the way, so that if you need to, if somebody has to go, there's always those where people just ghost and disconnect and you're left. But it should be the case that in a dungeon you're always going to be relatively close to one of these areas, and then the idea is that over time you would be able to not only have a way to through kind of a meeting stone, gathering stone type situation at somewhere near the entrance of these dungeons to utilize, but then the system of like safe spots would also be able to be traversed in a similar way once they've been unlocked by the player in question.
So in a realistic scenario, right, if we lose our tank, who gets wife aggro or something, right? Oh my goodness, I got to go offline.
Wait a minute, whoa! We do have.
I'm talking about me.
Like female we do have female tanks,
Yeah, okay. Husband aggro, but he's probably playing with them, right? So, no. So things come up. Someone's got to get offline, and now we've lost a person in our party, right? A healer. Let's say it's a healer. So is the plan to recover that group for us to find the nearest one of those zones that we can, And is there a method by which a person outside the area is able to meet us up there without having to basically forge through the whole area to that point on their own?
If that person has unlocked that safe zone, in the sense that there would be some kind of a mechanism there, probably a smaller representation of what you would find outside in these affinity stone kind of gathering stone type places, where once you've attuned to that, then you would be able to access those different node points in the dungeon to be summoned to that place.
Limited use and something that it has to be attained, obviously.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definitely by exploration, it sounds like, right? Like you've got to have been there first.
Exactly.
Right.
And we can, depending on how that plays out, we can further encumber that process by requiring something like a reagent that needs to be utilized, and other things to, the goal obviously isn't to trivialize the traversal of the dungeon, but at the same time, we want to make sure that players have some methods of being able to, meet up and form these groups. So there's that. And then there is a conversation to be had. I don't know if this is the place to have it. I'm not sure. I know that I want to do a more dedicated talk to it, but we do need to talk about instancing a little bit, because it's not that Pantheon will have no instancing. One of the things that we are dedicated to, for example, is having open world dungeons. We want the dungeons to be shared environments, but that doesn't mean that the boss rooms of those dungeons may not be instanced. That access to boss rooms and dungeons could be, by accomplishing something in the zone, you've got to go to this location in the dungeon and then this location in the dungeon, and maybe there's something you have to pick up here, something that's a drop here, and all that in a shared environment. But then once you have what you need, the key or the talisman or the whatever,
you can access that instance.
Go and you can access that.
I love it.
That area. So that's one thing that we're considering, certainly when we look at raids as well.
Because waiting for respawns, right? That was another question we had. I was like, hey, there's no downtime like sitting around waiting for a respawn. You get to know the people around you. You make some friends, right? But at the same time, if you and I think more like launch day, right? Is there's hundreds of people waiting on it. Everybody attacks this thing, and maybe 3 people get credit. Makes that a very tedious experience, right? So I think there is some sense, there instancing. So.
To having limited instancing, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So, speaking of backfilling, you have said in the past that the LFG tool is going to be more akin to a kind of like a dating site, as opposed to a put your name in and get pulled to the place. So, what can you tell us about this grinder for Pantheon?
How do I not get swiped left on? That's the question. I want to make friends.
I'm feeling a little uncomfortable now talking about this, because that's a pretty evocative way to think about it. I know there was a few times where Brad, what did he call it? P harmony, I think was what he called it.
P harmony.
P harmony.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, from the beginning, we've because of what we talked about earlier about shared experience and kind of existing in a connected way with other players on your server in the world. We have a pretty strong, firm stance against something like an automatic dungeon finder that's going to create those
auto build.
I stay in the city, I queue up, and I'm whisked away, and here are these other strangers that I'm going to
Zero group design required, right? It auto builds your group. And I don't have to think what maybe we run into, right? So I you have to do some resourcing and find the right build the puzzle before you go in. Yeah. And none of that matters with a group finder. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So the system that we have that we have designed and we have to be rolled out is one in which we're not doing any automatic whisking away, but we're allowing players to drill really deep into who they are, what they have to offer, and then allowing players to also search for other players based on that deep criteria. And so these are all things that you log into something like a WoW and you watch like looking for group chat, and it's like so and so looking for group, and then they just list out in these long strings.
Must link your chiefs.
Yeah,
yeah.
Achievements, like looking for all these. Like we want to be able to incorporate all of that into a UI system that allows you to really personalize who you are, put even some personal information about yourself, your character, anything you would choose to show, have a representation of who you are. The character identity and players' affinity and relationship with their characters is really important to us, and so being able to kind of have a place where you can craft your persona and put that forward to other players, I think is going to be a really nice touch, and something that will complement the that social kind of dynamic and those social bonds that form. But that mixed with, again, that emphasis on exploration, and so you're going to be able to I'd love for there to be, for example, a window in that profile where players can see, like, what meeting stones have you unlocked, what meeting stones you have access to, and then vice versa. You can tell that when you're looking for other players to pull in, you can know before even asking, like, okay, we can actually get this person all the way to us.
To vet somebody before you essentially recruit them by just inspecting their profile, so to speak, right? Like if they haven't accessed the area that you're going to, you're dealing with a new person in that area. It kind of helps you frame your expectations, I think, before you even group up with them. Right. Whereas you can tell if they've done it before because they've got the end, right? They've got that whole section unlocked.
In your development of this, are you thinking like they'll be able to see your build to some degree? Like, I'm spec'd out a certain way. Because you have the mastery points, right?
Yep.
So will they be able to see, like, that I've specialized in, mesmerizing if I'm an enchanter, or if I'm more spec'd as a DPS warrior as opposed to a tank? Will people be able to make informed decisions? And do you see that being an issue with people saying, I don't like this build, so I'm not going to invite that person?
Well, one reason that I wanted to stay away from builds specifically is to try and avoid a situation like that where you would have someone who's a suboptimal warrior based on a build path they've chosen. So the mastery system, because it's meant to be a companion from level 1 and provide kind of that talent experience, but more in an alternate advancement way, and that you're not limited to what you can pick and win. It's more, what are you going to unlock first? And are there going to be kind of meta paths that emerge? I'm almost certain that there will be.
That's because it's what MMO players do.
Exactly.
Someone's crunching the numbers. Yeah, totally.
But it's not going to be so. It's going to be more in a min-maxing sense. Not, I've completely broken myself because I'm a warrior and I've decided to go after like a DPS role kind of thing.
Right.
So do I see that playing in? Possibly. What I would say right now is that something like that, I think it would be good to show something like that in this, but I would see that as an opt-in type thing, where you can choose whether or not you would want your specific mastery spec to be made public or to be visible in your profile. But something like that, these are kind of systems that we have a foundation in mind in terms of what we want to provide players. What actually ends up working out to be successful and resonating with the player base is another question, and so tweaks will be made down the road with those
with live data, right? Like, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think he covered everything in our group chat there, didn't he? All right. So let's wrap up this part 1 and talk a little bit about initial leveling. And this is where I, having played some of the test sessions, have a little bit of a concern. When you start out, you're almost needing to level immediately. It's been my experience. And I don't know if that's something that's going to be tweaked more, but to borrow a phrase from Sechari, I'm getting into these boxing matches with rabbits. And
that's from Ko, right? Because I looked over Ko's shoulder during his stream, and I saw him ducking and dodging and weaving, and then a snake killed him, right? Like his very first thing. Granted, he made the mistake of not putting any of his skills on his bar, right? So there's rookie mistakes that I think will get you. But that was my question. Sorry, Mox, to have overrun you on
fine.
this, right? But when I start, my main concern isn't so much the complexities of combat. It's like, where are my skills and how do I put them on my bar, right? So is it maybe overtuned? That was my question, right, Mox? And by all means, please throw me out.
Well, I just basically want to know, like, ideally, at what point do you think people should first be grouping? At what level?
Well, two quick things. First of all, I do think that things are overtuned right now at the lowest levels. So I'm going to say that first.
One punch kill on a rabbit. Okay, good.
Yeah. And the second thing is, you're also looking at a largely a UI UX experience that's largely undeveloped, at worst in some cases, and underdeveloped in others. And so expect just a much more effective
intensely more tuning required, right?
Yes.
Is what it sounds like.
And just giving players a much better wherewithal in terms of first starting out. Where are my abilities? How do I get them on my bar? You know, what am I looking out for? What are some of the unique things in combat that I need to pay attention to?
Give them that hand up type thing.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when do I expect players to first start grouping up? I can say this: I want class roles to be effective for that class right out of the gate.
Nice.
Okay. Perfect. I want a Dire Lord, for example. I want a warrior to be able to tank and have means of doing that. Not just I have a larger health pool, but I actually have at least one ability starting out that allows me to start engaging in that role. Should I choose to?
You're talking about like a taunt, right, or some tank,
something that helps build threat.
Threat management activity. Okay.
Yeah.
This is good because I've played MMOs where you have no distinct class identity to begin with
until like 15.
Yeah, so you just basically until some certain level it begins to emerge, right? But everybody's a DPS to begin with. Everyone just is killing rabbits, right, or killing, and that sense of, okay, here's the role I play, or here's how how I've built this character, isn't there, to begin with.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then right now it's around level 4, level 5. That's when you're going to start running into your first perilous tasks, which are your tasks that are meant to be tackled by a group. So whether you're driven by a specific perilous task where you want a particular reward attached to that, or just where the content, like the Goblin Cave in Throne Fast, is designed to be doable in the earlier sections of that area by a, not even necessarily a full group, but at least a group of
2 or 3 people,
characters. Yeah.
Okay, so what about if I have, I'm starting out, let's say I play a dwarf, and let's say Sechari is going to play a human. How far apart are we looking at as far as these starting areas? That if we're starting at the same day, at what point is it reasonable for us to think to travel to the other person's area?
This is a question based on real life, by the way, right? I'm a human, and Mox is in real life a dwarf.
That's true.
And we have to get together from time to time for lunch. So
right, exactly. Yeah. Genghis Grill.
Well, I mean, we might be pinging you guys just for some real world.
How do you do it? The cars are not in the game.
I mean, I remember EverQuest. Like, you had to get on a boat, go to a different continent to go play with the dwarves if you were a human. So, like, I remember that. Is it going to be something similar to that?
I similar to that. How?
Like, there'll be some sort of time investment at level 1 or 0 to get from my starting area to his starting area so that we can group together.
Time investment, yes. Like, there will be a path to do it.
Okay.
Will it be instantaneous?
No, I would hope not.
But again, at the same time, like I was saying at the very beginning, there's no there's a careful balance between this is such a
That's a rough question. I understood.
there's so much that could be talked about here because travel is another one of those things
Absolutely.
that can introduce massive unnecessary obtuseness and just a huge drain on the enjoyment and the satisfaction that you can get when you are forced to just meander these amazingly long distances all the time, especially when you're talking about a game with a death penalty where there is, if you die, you're needing to
Traversal has a cost, right? It's you got to put effort in, and you've got, in many ways, group to do it.
Mhm.
If you're a starter right out of the gate, and now you want to go from my spot to someone else's starting area.
Yep. But if we make it too easy, if we make it too straightforward, then that sense of arrival I've talked about before is lost. And all of a sudden you don't feel like you've accomplished something by making it to this whole other land. It doesn't even feel like another land anymore. It feels that was one thing really cool about EQ in those earlier games is like you felt like I'm in another world, and some of that was because of the I still one of those really weird memories that's like just jammed into my memory and will always be there is the first time I saw a troll in EverQuest. I was in Thanos at Blackburrow playing like right outside of the entrance of Blackburrow, killing some of the gnolls there, and then all of a sudden this troll is standing there with like a bronze helmet and some of this bronze armor, and I was like I'd never seen anything like it, and it felt like this feels like a world. Like, where did this person come from? How in the world do you get to wherever they hail from? And so, but there's a way to follow that nostalgia and that kind of mystical, magical feeling too far, and expect that kind of a moment to hold up for everybody and to continuously hold up. And so I think the key is threading that again carefully to evolve that in a way where I want there to be more of a sense of arrival with Pantheon than you get in most modern games, where it's just kind of a throwaway.
You're right. It sounds like you've got a trade-off, right? Like you want meaningful area traversal and coming up, and you've earned wherever you happen to be. That matters a lot. Right? And on the other hand, you've got, well, how can I easy traverse so I can go play with my friends? Now, there's a cost, right, to that, and that's one of the prices for that.
And again, we're not opposed to considering some more extreme ideas, and we'll try them. We'll try them in beta. We'll do something where we have maybe
like a neutral starting zone type of thing, where you could choose that I want to start not in my hometown, I want to start somewhere else.
I don't know if we'll go that route, but I was thinking more that there might be, similarly to the way that WoW had like the deep run tram that would travel between Stormwind and Ironforge. If you imagine that there is a capital city, so let's just say it's Broken Maw for Rainfall, it's Kadasa for Whitethaw, and it's Thronefast for Kingsreach, that there would be a faster way to travel to that kind of capital city on that continent, and then from that capital city,
you need to make some type of journey.
Yeah, that's something that we will consider, because the other key is that Pantheon is very adventure and exploration focused, meaning that there's so many ways throughout the life of your character to unlock new and more interesting and more convenient, in some cases significantly convenient forms of travel, be that through the taming system and the mounts, be that through gliding, be that through the climbing system and all that you can do there, and then other things we haven't even talked about yet, that some of them are already in the game secretly, that make that a lot more fun and enjoyable and faster. So we have to be careful too what we do for starting players, that doesn't take away from that sense of growing into the world opening up more and more to you over time.
And the player community will surprise you. You will be amazed. I think it's some of the creative things people come up with to skirt the design, right? Like they've found a way to run each other, through this for tips, right? Or something, right? I've seen that happen in games too.
For sure.
So Okay, so there's the first half of that interview. Definitely want to, thank Joppa for humoring us as he did.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about this conversation, this happened before we even got talking to him. He actually said to us, "Hey, I want to ask you guys, feel free to have the conversation with me. If you disagree or if you want to push back about something, say so."
Right.
That's brave, right, Mox, to have that kind of a stance on an interview. So
yeah,
I think
for sure.
we did.
We challenged him. We challenged him, and probably not so much challenge him in you're doing this wrong. It more was like, what's your plan? What are you thinking about? What's your thought process on this? And he struggled a couple times to answer, and that's okay. It's okay if he says, we haven't gotten there yet. That gives us a chance down the road to say, 6 months or a year down the road, when they do start talking about those systems, to say, hey, we asked you about this, last time, or last year or whatever. Where are we at now? And hopefully we'll get an answer then. So it's all good.
Right.
All good.
And I'll say it says a lot about him, right? It says a lot about their studio that they are secure enough to go have those hard conversations even during development. Usually, studios very tightly control the narrative, right? How the conversation goes, so that it's risky, or
right.
to have that kind of thing. So mad respect. I mean, I can't say enough about Joppa's character and how how much respect we have for him,
and respect for them as a whole company being available to us. Mm-hmm. We've approached them twice for interviews, and both times they have stepped up and been willing to have a conversation with us, with our small channel, and I can't thank them enough for that.
Indeed.
So keep an eye out for part 2 of this. It will be out, as Sechari mentioned, in just a couple days. Our plan is this should be releasing on Sunday night. So hopefully, if all goes well, Tuesday night will be part 2. So keep an eye on our socials and on our YouTube channel for that. Speaking of socials, as always, check us out on Facebook.com/Disparate Worlds, on Twitter @DisparateWorlds, on DisparateWorlds.org, our website. Also on Patreon, Patreon.com/Disparate Worlds. And our lucky patrons got an early view of this, so that was just a little perk we were able to offer to them. So if you're interested in early access to content like this going forward, check us out there. And let's see, in addition to on our website, in the description below is a link to our Discord. Please join us there.
Yes, we would love to have some ongoing conversation about what all was shared during this. So by all means, join us in our Discord. We would love to hear more or thoughts on that, right? So that'll be it for us this episode. Thank you as always for watching. Do the comment, the like, the subscribe. We appreciate any kind of engagement you give us, because that way maybe we can have 400 subscribers one day.
One day.
It's a goal in the very far future. We're making our way slowly there. So thank you always, those of you who followed us right from the beginning. That's it. Take care of yourselves. Remember always to be immovable in your principles and irresistible in your passion.